tornadoes, thunder and lightning, rain, cold and wind, ice and snow, heat and humidity, hurricanes. This is weather in CISD.
Hello CISD students, my name is Mr. W and I am one of the biggest science nerds here in CISD. I love everything about science. I especially love it when you guys are doing science with your classmates and with your teachers. And I am here today to talk to you about the weather. And so I want to just talk a little bit about what is weather. First, if you can remember that you have senses that help you see and hear and feel what's going on around you, that's going to help you know what weather is. So things that you can see like clouds or rain, things that you can hear like wind, things that you can feel like whether it's hot or cold, those are all weather. And so I'm going to talk to you a little about those things today. So the first thing I want to talk to you today about is something called temperature. And temperature is something I think you know a little bit about already. So the way we think of temperature is how warm or how cold the air around us is. Now everything can have a temperature if you want to measure the temperature of a cup of milk or a puddle of water outside, but for weather we really want to focus on the temperature of the air around us. So how do we measure that? How do we know what it is? How do we know how warm or cold it is? Well, we have a special tool, and I think you might have seen one of these before. This is called a thermometer. And at the bottom of the thermometer, there's a little red liquid. And that red liquid, if it's warm, that red liquid will travel up through this tube, and you can see a little red line in there, and it's traveling up through the tube. And so the warmer the temperature is, the higher the red line will go. And then we see some numbers on the side that we can read to tell us the actual temperature. And so that's a really important tool that we can use when we're measuring temperature and trying to describe our weather.
Think about your home. Have you noticed a thermometer inside or outside your house? Thermometers come in all shapes and sizes. Some are meant for different things, but they all measure temperature by checking if things are warm or cold. Clouds are little drops of water or ice that are so light they appear to float in the sky. Clouds can look very different from day to day, and they all have very strange names, but they're all made of the same thing, little drops of water or ice crystals. Sometimes clouds build up so much water that it falls out of the clouds as precipitation. Sometimes precipitation can be violent and even dangerous. The kind of precipitation we see depends on how warm or cold it is here at the ground and actually up in the clouds themselves. Rain arrives at the ground as liquid water because it's warmer near the ground. Sometimes, if it's cold enough, the rain can freeze when it hits the ground, and we call that freezing rain. Freezing rain can cause damage because ice is heavy, and as it builds up, it can break trees and power lines. Sleet can happen when it's so cold out that rain freezes before it gets to the ground, creating little balls of ice, like you see here. Snow is made of little tiny ice crystals that get stuck together, and then they become heavy enough to fall to the ground. For us to get snow, it needs to be very, very cold here at the ground where we live and up in the clouds. When it is, you can get a lot of snow. Hail are large balls of ice that form only in thunderstorms, and they become so heavy, eventually they fall to the ground. The longer the winds in the thunderstorm can hold the hail up in the cloud, the larger and more dangerous the hailstones become. When hail hits the ground, it can cause severe damage to property. To measure precipitation, especially rain, we use a device called a rain gauge, like this. If precipitation falls as snow or ice, then we need to use a ruler to measure it.
So the next thing I want to talk to you about is something called wind. And when you're describing the weather, wind is very, very important because it makes you feel very differently depending on whether there's a lot of wind or whether there's a little bit of wind. So what is it? Well, it's kind of simple, and I think you might be thinking, isn't that just air that's moving around? And that's exactly right. So the faster the air moves, the more windy it is. So do you remember a time when it was really windy outside and how that felt? Have you ever felt wind inside? We can actually make wind inside with something you might have in your house right now. So I have a little flag here, and we're going to make it windy inside right now. Okay, too much wind, it's too windy. How fast the wind is blowing, or wind speed, can be measured with special equipment. Have you ever seen something like this? You might if you look around on nearby buildings or barns. These are used to measure wind direction, or what way it's coming from. Have you ever noticed these around your house or school? Flags are really, really useful instruments to help us measure where the wind is coming from. But also sometimes you can tell how fast the wind is blowing by looking at how much the flag is flapping. You may have noticed one of these outside someone's house or school. This is called an anemometer, and it measures wind speed. The flap that turns also can help determine the wind direction. Some storms, such as tornadoes or hurricanes, can produce dangerous wind. So we need special scientists to constantly watch the weather to make sure we all stay safe. Have you ever seen somebody like this on TV? These men and women are called meteorologists, and they're scientists that study the weather. Meteorologists collect all the measurements that we've talked about today, and they put them all together to create a weather forecast. A forecast helps us see what the weather's going to be in the future. Forecasts help us keep safe when weather turns violent. I hope you enjoyed learning a little about the weather and some of the tools meteorologists use to make their forecasts. Until we see each other again, try going outside and doing some observations on your own. Maybe you even have some equipment that we talked about lying around at home. Either way, stay curious, have fun, and go do some science.